The school gym was buzzing with noise. Sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, and basketballs thudded against the walls. At the center of the chaos sat Emily, her wheelchair parked near the bleachers. She tried to focus on the open book on her lap, but the whispers had already started. A circle of teenagers formed around her, their smirks cutting sharper than knives. "Hey, Wheels, need us to push you to class again?" One boy sneered. Another leaned down, grinning. "Bet you can't even race a snail." "Might lose that too." Laughter erupted. Emily lowered her eyes, clutching the armrest of her chair until her knuckles whitened. She had learned to ignore them, but some days the weight of their cruelty was unbearable. Inside, she wanted to scream, "You don't know me. You don't know what I fight through every single day." But the words stayed locked inside. What none of them knew was that her father, a decorated Green Beret, had been planning something special for weeks. Emily had begged him not to make a big deal about her disability, but he wanted her to understand a truth the world often forgot: that strength doesn't always look like muscles or medals. Sometimes it sits quietly in a wheelchair, enduring storms others can't imagine, and today, he wasn't coming alone. The gym doors slammed open. A stunned silence fell as 32 men in crisp uniforms marched in perfect formation. Their boots hit the polished floor like thunder. The air shifted instantly. Laughter died, whispers froze. At the front was Emily's father, his green beret tilted slightly on his head. His eyes scanned the room until they locked on his daughter. "Eyes front," he barked, and the formation stopped with military precision. Every soldier turned sharply toward Emily. The bullies, who had moments ago been mocking, now stood pale and frozen, unsure whether to run or stay. Emily's father stepped forward. "Students," he said, his voice carrying across the gym. "I'm Sergeant Major Daniel Carter, United States Army Special Forces. And this young lady," he pointed to Emily, his voice softening, "is my daughter." Gasps rippled through the gym. The Green Berets moved as one, marching toward Emily. When they reached her, the commander of the unit, a tall, battle-scarred soldier, dropped to one knee so his eyes were level with hers. "Ma'am," he said firmly, extending his hand. "On behalf of all of us, it's an honor." One by one, each of the 32 soldiers shook her hand. Some saluted. Some simply smiled with a warmth that said more than words ever could. Emily's eyes blurred with tears. For the first time in her life at that school, she wasn't small. She wasn't mocked. She wasn't invisible. She was being honored. The bullies stood frozen, guilt plastered across their faces. Emily's father turned his gaze toward them. "You think weakness is sitting in a wheelchair?" he asked, his voice low but dangerous. "This girl fights battles you'll never understand. She wakes up every morning and chooses courage. That's more strength than most soldiers will ever see." Silence. Not a single student dared to laugh now. He placed his hand gently on Emily's shoulder. "Strength isn't measured by what you can carry. It's measured by what you refuse to give up on. And my daughter," his voice cracked just slightly, "my daughter is the strongest person I know." The gym erupted into applause. Teachers wiped their eyes. Even students who had never spoken to Emily before clapped until their palms stung. Emily's chin lifted, a small but radiant smile spreading across her face. For the first time, she wasn't the girl in the wheelchair. She was the daughter of warriors, and a fighter in her own right. And the 32 Green Berets who showed up that day made sure no one would ever forget it. The school gym was alive with noise. Sneakers screeched across polished wood, basketballs bounced in uneven rhythms, and shouts echoed against the high rafters. It was just another chaotic lunch break for most kids, but for Emily Carter, every echo carried weight. She sat off to the side near the bleachers, her wheelchair angled slightly toward the wall. In her lap rested an open book, her safe shield. She traced the edges of the pages with her finger, pretending to read, though the words blurred in her mind. It wasn't long before shadows fell across her. "Well, look who's here." "Wheels!" A boy's voice dripped with mockery. Emily's heart sank. She didn't even need to look up. The ringleader, Ryan, was always the first to start. His friends flanked him like wolves circling prey. Another voice chimed in, higher pitched. "Hey, Wheels, race me to the door." "Bet you lose." "What's the matter?" No gas in the tank? Laughter erupted around her. Emily's face burned hot, but she kept her eyes fixed on her book, though her vision was nothing but watery blur. Ryan leaned closer, his voice a low hiss. You know, if you weren't stuck in that chair, maybe people would actually notice you. Instead, you're just weak. The word stabbed. Weak. She gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. Inside her chest, something screamed to fight back, to shout that she was more than they could ever understand. But the words caught in her throat, locked away by years of ridicule. Bet she can't even climb a single step, one of the boys added. He kicked the front wheel of her chair lightly, making it jolt. Better hope the elevator never breaks. The circle of laughter grew louder, sharper. Each insult chipped at her defenses. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds fade into muffled echoes. In her mind, she wasn't in the gym. She was back home, sitting at the kitchen table while her father, tall, broad-shouldered, always smelling faintly of gun oil and dust, leaned close to her. "Don't listen to them, Em," he would say. "They see the chair, not the warrior. But I know the truth. You're stronger than any of them." His words gave her strength on most days. But today, under the spotlight of laughter, even her father's voice felt distant. The bullies weren't finished. One of them snatched the book from her lap. "Hey, check this out. Reading fairy tales, Wheels? Think a prince is gonna come push you around all day?" They tossed the book between them like a toy, pages bending, the cover scuffing against the floor. Emily's stomach knotted. That book wasn't just any book. It was a gift from her dad before his last deployment. She had carried it everywhere. The worn edges a reminder that even in the loneliest places, she wasn't truly alone. "Give it back," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What was that?" Ryan cupped his ear dramatically. "Speak up, Wheels." "Didn't hear you." Her chest heaved, but the words refused to grow louder. She felt the heat of humiliation spreading, the helplessness suffocating. The circle of kids jeered louder, and the gym seemed to close in on her. She lowered her gaze, silent tears burning her eyes. But deep inside, beneath the pain, a quiet ember still glowed. She wasn't weak. She wasn't helpless. She just hadn't been given her moment yet, and what no one in that gym knew was that her moment was coming. Her father, a decorated Green Beret, had arranged a surprise visit that day, and he wasn't coming, alone. The laughter still echoed when the heavy doors of the gym slammed. Open. Bang. The sound cut through the noise like a gunshot. Every head turned. Boots thundered against the polished floor in unison. Sharp, commanding, unstoppable. 32 men marched in perfect formation, their uniforms crisp, their green berets angled low over steely eyes. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The playful chaos of the gym collapsed into silence. Emily froze, her tears still fresh. For a second, she thought she was imagining it. But then her gaze locked on the man leading them, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence radiating authority. Her father, Sergeant Major Daniel Carter, every step echoing with years of combat discipline. The gym, moments ago filled with jeers, now vibrated with the quiet, heavy weight of respect. "Eyes front," he barked. The command cracked like lightning. In a flawless snap, all 32 Green Berets pivoted as one, facing the girl in the wheelchair. Their eyes locked on Emily, not the bullies, not the crowd. Just her. Ryan and his friends shrank back, their earlier bravado dissolving into wide-eyed fear. A hush swallowed the room. Emily's father marched forward, his boots steady, his gaze unwavering. He stopped directly in front of her, towering above the wheelchair. His voice carried across the gym, deep and resonant. "Students," he said, "my name is Sergeant Major Daniel Carter of the United States Army Special Forces, and this," he placed his hand gently on Emily's shoulder, "is my daughter." The words landed heavy. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel's eyes softened as he looked at her, but when he turned back to the students, his voice hardened like steel. "You see a chair, I see courage. Every day, this young lady wakes up and faces battles you'll never understand. She doesn't complain. She doesn't quit. That makes her stronger than most soldiers I've ever led." The formation of soldiers moved forward. boots struck the floor in perfect rhythm, closing the gap between Emily and the wall of green uniforms. Then, as if rehearsed, the commander of the unit, a tall, scarred veteran with piercing eyes, broke from the line. He approached Emily slowly, lowered himself to one knee so he was eye level with her, and extended his hand. "Ma'am," he said, his voice solemn, "on behalf of the U.S. Army Special Forces, it's an honor to meet you." Emily's lips parted in shock. For a moment she couldn't move. Then, trembling, she lifted her hand and placed it in his. His grip was firm, respectful, steadying. The other Green Berets followed. One by one, each soldier knelt or bowed his head slightly as he shook Emily's hand. Some saluted her. Some simply held her gaze and smiled. But every single one treated her not as a girl in a wheelchair, but as someone worthy of respect. Her book was still lying on the floor where the bullies had tossed it. One soldier quietly picked it up, brushed off the scuff marks, and handed it back to her as though it were a medal of honor. Emily blinked rapidly, her eyes filling again. Not with tears of pain this time, but with something new. Pride. The bullies were silent now, pale and shifting nervously. Their earlier smirks were gone, replaced by the realization that their cruelty had just been witnessed by warriors who had stared down enemies far more dangerous than them. Emily's father turned his gaze toward them. His voice dropped lower, quieter, but deadlier. "You mocked her because you thought she was weak," he said. "But strength isn't about how fast you can run or how high you can jump. Strength is surviving what others can't, and my daughter is stronger than any of you will ever understand." Not a single student dared to move. Emily's hand still trembled, but her heart felt lighter than it ever had. For the first time, she wasn't ashamed of the chair. She wasn't afraid of the whispers, because right here in front of the entire school, 32 Green Berets had shown her, and everyone else, exactly who she really was. Not wheels, not helpless, but a fighter. And this was only the beginning. The gym remained frozen in silence. 32 Green Berets stood at attention, their presence heavy, unshakable. Emily sat at the center of it all, the book her bullies had tossed now resting safely in her lap. Her father's hand was still on her shoulder, grounding her, steadying her. Ryan and his crew had backed toward the bleachers, their earlier smirks long gone. They shifted nervously, like kids who had suddenly realized they were playing in a world far bigger and far tougher than they understood. Sergeant Major Carter turned his head slowly, his gaze sweeping across every face in the room. When he spoke, his voice wasn't a shout, but it carried the weight of command, the kind of voice that could silence a battlefield. "You see a girl in a wheelchair," he said. "You think that means weakness. But you're wrong. Every morning my daughter wakes up and fights battles none of you can see. Pain, doubt, fear. She faces them all, and she wins. That's more courage than I've seen in 1,000 men." He paused. His words seemed to sink into the air like stones dropping into water. Then, slowly he turned toward Ryan. The boy stiffened, caught in the Green Beret's unflinching stare. "You think it makes you strong to mock her?" Daniel's voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut steel. "Strength isn't pushing someone down. It's lifting them up. Weakness hides behind laughter and cruelty. Real strength." He turned back to Emily, his hand tightening protectively on her shoulder. "Real strength looks like this." Emily swallowed hard. The tears that blurred her eyes now weren't born of humiliation, but of something deeper. Relief. Pride. The commander of the unit stepped forward again, his boots echoing with authority. He looked not at the bullies, but at the rest of the students crowded around the gym. "Every one of us in this formation has seen war," he said, his voice gravelly, scarred by years in combat. "We've carried brothers off battlefields. We've fought through fear most people couldn't survive. And I'll tell you this, none of us would ever dare call her weak." He turned toward Emily, bowed his head respectfully, and stepped back into line. Something shifted in the room. Teachers in the corner dabbed their eyes. Students who had never spoken to Emily before leaned forward, their expressions softened with new understanding. The bullies, once towering over her, now looked small, powerless, insignificant. Daniel Carter bent down so only Emily could hear. His voice dropped, filled with quiet emotion. He whispered, I told you. One day they'd see you the way I do. Today's that day. Emily's throat tightened. She couldn't speak, but she didn't need to. The slight upward curl of her lips was answer enough. Her father straightened and addressed the crowd one final time. Remember this, he said, his voice filling the gym. Strength isn't measured by medals or muscles. It's measured by what you overcome when no one's watching. My daughter is living proof of that. And if you take one thing away from today, let it be this. Respect the battles you cannot see. He saluted her. 32 Green Berets snapped into salute with him, their arms rising in flawless unison. The sound of applause erupted. It started hesitant, a single pair of hands clapping near the bleachers, but grew quickly, echoing louder and louder until the gym thundered with it. Emily lifted her chin, her face glowing. For the first time, the eyes on her weren't filled with pity or ridicule. They were filled with respect, admiration. She wasn't Wheels. She wasn't helpless. She was Emily Carter. Daughter of a warrior, fighter in her own right. And 32 Green Berets had just made sure no one would ever forget it. The applause still echoed when the formation of Green Berets filed back toward the double doors. Their boots thundered in unison, their discipline unbroken even as they left. Sergeant Major Carter lingered for one last look at his daughter, his eyes soft with pride. Then he gave her a wink, their secret signal, before disappearing with his men. And just like that, the gym was quiet again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It wasn't mocking or heavy with whispers. This silence carried awe, reverence. Emily sat in the middle of it all, her book still pressed to her lap, her fingers tracing the worn edges. She felt taller somehow, though her chair hadn't moved an inch. Her chest rose with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Confidence. The first sound came from the bleachers, clapping. Then more until the entire gym erupted again. But this time the sound wasn't for the soldiers. It was for her. Ryan, the ringleader of the bullies, shifted uncomfortably. His face was pale, his cocky smirk gone. He rubbed the back of his neck, muttering under his breath. We didn't mean... But no one cared what Ryan had to say anymore. For the first time, the eyes of the crowd weren't on him. They were on Emily. A girl from her history class stepped forward hesitantly. Hey, Emily, she said, her voice trembling at first. That was incredible. I never realized... She stopped herself, then gave a small smile. I'd like to sit with you at lunch. If that's okay? Emily blinked in surprise. She had eaten alone for years, tucked in the corner of the cafeteria, her only company the book her father had given her. Her voice cracked as she whispered back, Yeah, I'd like that. More students came closer. A boy offered to carry her bag. Another apologized softly for never speaking up when the bullies mocked her. One by one, the invisible walls that had kept her isolated began to crumble. Ryan and his friends finally slinked away, their heads low, their voices hushed. Their reign of mockery had ended in a single afternoon, shattered by the thunder of 32 boots and the steady hand of a father who refused to let his daughter be diminished. And though no punishment, the school could give them would ever sting as much as what they had just witnessed. They knew deep down they would never forget the look on Emily's face as the soldiers saluted her. That night, Emily sat at her desk, the book open in front of her. The day replayed in her mind again and again. The bullies' laughter, the sudden slam of the doors, the sight of her father leading his brothers in arms straight toward her. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a notebook, the one she usually kept hidden. On the first clean page, she wrote, Strength isn't what people see, it's what they don't see, the battle's inside. Today, they finally saw mine. She paused, then signed it the way her father always signed his letters home. Emily Carter, fighter. The next morning at school, things felt different. Students who once looked past her now nodded in greeting. Some smiled. A few even asked about her father and the Green Berets, their curiosity genuine. And when she rolled into the cafeteria at lunch, she didn't sit in the corner. This time, a table full of classmates waved her over. Emily hesitated for a moment, then pushed her wheels forward with steady confidence. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was being wheeled into the room. She felt like she was moving under her own strength. The house was quiet that evening. The television hummed softly in the living room, but Emily barely noticed it. She sat at the kitchen table, her notebook open, the words she had written earlier still fresh. Strength isn't what people see. It's what they don't see. The battles inside. The front door creaked open. Heavy boots tapped across the floorboards, slower now, not in formation, but with the weary rhythm of a man who had carried the weight of the world and was finally home. Her father stepped into the kitchen, his green beret tucked under his arm. He looked different here than he had in the gym. Not a towering commander, not the sergeant major who could silence a room with a single barked order, but simply Dad. Emily looked up, her smile shy but warm. "You didn't have to do that today." Daniel Carter raised an eyebrow, setting his beret on the table. "Didn't have to?" "Emily, I'd march 1,000 soldiers into that school if it meant you'd finally see what I see." She flushed, lowering her gaze to the notebook. "But it was a lot. Everyone's staring at me. I don't like being the center of attention." He pulled out the chair across from her, lowering himself into it with a grunt. His broad hands rested on the table, scarred and calloused from years of service. He leaned forward, his voice softening. You've been the center of my attention since the day you were born, and you've always been stronger than you realize. Today wasn't about making you a spectacle. It was about showing the world, and maybe reminding you, that strength doesn't come from standing tall. It comes from never bowing down." Her eyes glistened. "They called me weak, Dad." His jaw tightened, his expression hard for a moment, then softened again. "They don't know what weak is. Weak is running your mouth at someone who can't fight back. Weak is mocking what you don't understand. But you?" He reached across the table, gently covering her hand with his. "You're stronger than most soldiers I've led. You face pain every day, and you don't quit. That's strength." Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, had always wanted to. And after today, maybe she finally did. They sat in silence for a while. The quiet, comfortable, the kind that only came between two people who had weathered storms together. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice lower, almost a whisper. "You know, in the field, when things got tough, we had a saying, 'No man left behind.' No matter how bad it got, we carried each other. Today, those men carried you. Not because you couldn't stand, but because you've been carrying yourself for years. It was our honor to stand beside you." Emily's eyes blurred with fresh tears, but this time she didn't try to hide them. She let them fall, her chest swelling with something unfamiliar, acceptance. She gave a small, wobbly smile. "You embarrassed me, Dad." He chuckled, squeezing her hand gently. "That's my job, but I'd rather embarrass you than let you think, even for a second, that you're less than who you are." When she wheeled into her room that night, her father's words echoed in her mind. She paused at her desk, looking at the notebook again. She turned to a new page and wrote, "Strength isn't loud. It's quiet. It's choosing to fight, even when the world thinks you can't." Today, I saw myself the way my father always did. She signed it again. Emily Carter. Fighter. And for the first time, she truly believed it. Weeks passed, but the memory of that day in the gym didn't fade. If anything, it grew. The sound of boots striking the floor, the salute of 32 soldiers, the thunder of applause. It lived on in whispers that traveled through hallways, in stories retold at lunch tables. In the quiet way, students looked at Emily differently now. She wasn't Wheels anymore. She was Emily Carter, fighter, daughter of a Green Beret, and, in her classmates' eyes, someone they respected. The bullies didn't dare circle her chair again. Ryan, once so loud and smug, now kept his head down whenever she rolled past. His friends, who had once laughed the loudest, avoided her gaze altogether. Their silence was its own apology, though Emily never asked for it. She didn't need it. The truth was already written in the way the entire school had shifted. One afternoon in history class, the teacher mentioned the Green Berets. Normally, Emily would have kept her head down, avoiding the spotlight. But this time, when the teacher asked if anyone knew about them, the entire class turned toward her. Emily hesitated, then lifted her chin. "They're special operations soldiers," she said clearly, her voice steady. "They fight some of the hardest battles, not just with weapons, but with resilience." The teacher smiled. "That's right. Well said, Emily." She felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, but instead of shrinking, she breathed easier. For once, being seen didn't feel like a curse. At home, she filled her notebook page by page. Some days she wrote about her father, about the sacrifices he'd made, about how his brothers in arms had treated her like one of their own. Other days she wrote about herself, her struggles, her victories, even the quiet courage it took just to roll into school with her head high. Each page was signed the same way. Emily Carter, fighter. Her father read them sometimes when she left the notebook open. He never said much, just placed a hand gently on her shoulder, the kind of silent approval that meant more than words ever could. Months later, the school invited Sergeant Major Carter back to speak on Veterans Day. This time, when he entered the gym, the students rose to their feet in a standing ovation. But Daniel didn't stand alone. He gestured toward the side doors, and Emily wheeled forward, her notebook resting on her lap. The applause doubled. She hadn't planned to speak. Her hands trembled, her heart raced, but when the microphone was passed to her, she remembered her father's words. "Strength is choosing to fight, even when the world thinks you can't." So she spoke. "I used to think strength meant running faster than everyone else, or climbing stairs without help," she began, her voice soft but steady. "But that's not true. Strength is waking up every day and refusing to give up, even when life tries to tell you that you should." She paused, lifting her notebook so everyone could see. "I'm not weak. I'm not broken. I'm a fighter, and so are all of you, in your own way." The gym erupted. Applause thundered louder than it had on that first day. Students cheered, teachers wiped their eyes, and Sergeant Major Carter stood tall, pride radiating from him like sunlight. From that day forward, Emily's story spread beyond her school. Other kids in wheelchairs, kids who had been bullied or overlooked, found courage in her words. Her notebook became more than a journal. It became a message. A legacy, because 32 Green Berets had once shown up for her, and now she was ready to show up for others.